Hello, everybody. I am so honored to welcome Rebbetzin Golshevsky to our podcast today. I met Yehudis last year at a conference, and we met again this year. And she is such a fascinating woman. She is the founder and director of Shiviti, which she's going to tell us a little bit more about today. She's been in the field of Torah education for 25 years, according to your website. I don't know if it's
There- yeah.
updated.
It needs to be
You
updated. We're on 30 years by now.
30 years by now, okay, and also a prolific writer, translator, editor, done a lot of really cool things. So maybe just start by telling us a little bit about your upbringing, like what kind of educational experiences, like Jewish educational experiences you had growing up, and I guess what kind of led you down the path to where you are now.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep it brief because it's a sort of a complex story. But
Okay.
uh, we had a modern Orthodox Torah education growing up,
Okay.
and I I was probably could have been voted least likely to be teaching Torah as an adult, if anything. Um, Years ago, when I was teaching for a summer program in Israel, one of my old classmates, I hadn't seen her in so many years, came in and she saw me. It was a school for Balosh Tshuva, and I was teaching. And she saw me there as I was already married. I think she thought that I was a student, and so I saw her and I helped her with her bag up into the building. And I recognized her, she recognized me, and then, and then, I think she was assuming that I was like being really fresh and fresh to the scene. She was coming for a summer of chizuk and learning. I was, I guess, getting started, and then lo and behold, I walked in when the class started. I walked in and I sat down to teach, and I remember the look of shock on her face. Yeah, so my experiences in my early years were not great in my day school education for a whole bunch of reasons. I was very disengaged, and also I was a very spiritual child, and I found the educational environment had very little to say to me spiritually, which was that's a subject that is very close to my heart. The need for a closer to the soul, more spiritual education within day schools. But I found it very unsatisfying. And I only got more serious about Torah study, I would say, from the age of my mind started to change about Torah study about the age of about 17. I got exposure to Torah works and also to Torah people who were spiritual in the way that I could appreciate. And I started to get curious about the kinds of books that were feeding the spiritual lives of people that I felt were genuinely spiritual people. So I guess that started about the age of 17. I remember I came to Israel after high school, and I was reading all kinds of books, and my capacity, my learning capacity was very minimal, but my ideas were really big. So I remember reading all of these books by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And Rabbi Kaplan was a great footnoter. So I remember keeping these lists of the books that he kept on, the Sfarim that he kept on returning to again and again as references. So I started buying all of these Sfarim, and I didn't really have the capacity to use them at that age, and not until I was quite a bit older. But I acquired a lot of books and a lot of desire. I started to build a lot of desire to learn the kinds of Sfarim that were really close to me. But it took me a bunch of years through college, changing my course of study in college, where I started to get really focused on developing my Torah study. That was a process that took another couple of years.
Wow, interesting. It sounds like a real journey. Can you share maybe like some pivotal moments that like really shifted? It sounds like you kind of went through an evolution of like your relationship to Torah in general. Um, yeah, can you like point to specific, I guess, moments or anecdotes or something that really like shifted things for you?
Okay. Okay. So I went to university, State University of New York at Buffalo. I was very close with the Chabad Shluchim, with one of the Shluchim families there, and that particular rabbi he was giving classes as an adjunct professor in the university as well. So I was able to take classes in the community, Parsha class, whatever it was, at Beit Chabad, at the Chabad house, but also I had the advantage of also being able to take whatever he was teaching in the university. But aside from that, my course of study was not around that. I was an environmental studies major and starting pre-med. I was very into sciences, also the humanities, but that was really where I was thinking I was going. And I remember having this epiphany when I was, I guess, about 2 years into my university education. I remember coming back from a shiur. I came back from one of my rabbi's classes, and I sat down and I realized that I had, like, if I could pinpoint, I love to learn. I love to study, honestly, everything. I've always been very curious and very intellectually motivated, and I really connect deeply with a lot of different fields. So I really loved medicine. I really loved environmental studies. I loved English. I loved writing. All of that stuff I loved. But I remember sitting down in my dorm room one day in the middle of the day alone, and after coming back from a Parsha shiur, and realizing that probably the most joy I had in any given week was coming home from a shiur and then sitting down and talking it out with one of my suite mates who was Jewish but not observant. And I sort of made this assessment. It was a real epiphany for me. I love everything that I do, but I have to make a choice because you can't really be in two places fully. Like we say, Roshech Rubech, the best part of yourself, you can't really put, you can't put everywhere. You have to make choices. And I was heading in the direction of medicine or alternative medicine or environmental education. Those were really my passions. And I realized I was going to have to make a choice if I was going to be an interested layperson in Torah study and a professional in some other field, or if I was going to be an interested layperson in other fields and a professional in Torah study. I couldn't be, it just, when you're young, you sort of think you can do everything. And I think it was a really big bracha. It was a big blessing that at the tender age of 19 or 20, I guess it was about 19, that when I was 19, I realized that I couldn't do everything. So I could be interested in everything, but I can't do everything. And so that totally switched my gears. Like I immediately made arrangements to take a leave of absence from school, to go back to Israel, to prepare to go to a very, very advanced program was back in the States for 2 years. It got the ball rolling for a total change. I did get my college degree, but not in environmental studies and pre-med.
So I definitely want to go back to that after we talk about a little about your story. I want to go back to I love that language that you use, like an interested layperson versus a professional. And I like to kind of use that type of language when I try to explain to people the difference between sort of having just the more soundbite version of Yiddishkeit versus actually delving into sources and really engaging it in a serious way. But I'd love to talk more a little bit later about how does meaning does everybody need to have that professional kind of relationship with Torah, or is it also is there also a place just to be the interested layperson? So we could talk about that a little later. But I guess for you, when you say professional Torah, do you mean literally making it your profession, making it your career?
Okay, so no, I didn't. I meant.
Or did you just mean really investing in it?
The focus of your life.
Right.
Whether I was
Okay.
going to make money at doing that, I had no idea, and that wasn't
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, when after I got my education and I did my 2 years in a teaching seminary in addition to closing up and finishing my college education, and I got on a plane and moved to Eretz Yisrael. So I got teaching work right away. But I mean, for many, many years, I had to do a lot of different kinds of work in order to earn a living. I couldn't make a living as a Torah teacher. That took a long time for me to be able to do. But I kept doing it because it was a calling, a vocation. A vocation is not a job. That's like the idea of the professional. It's not so much about being able to earn a living as much as it is, voca from the Latin of it's a calling. Okay, so that calling I felt when I was quite young. And so I became extremely directed and goal-oriented in my study. And I went and acquired the skills that I needed to be able to learn this frum that I wanted to learn. So that process, that arc took let's say another 3 or 4 years just to get sufficiently grounded so that I could independently study the works that I wanted to. And of course, ever since then, for the last 30 years, it's been an ongoing relationship of expanding my Torah study so that I have so that I'm constantly getting new input and able to expand. Of course, the Torah is a vast, wide sea that's never ending. So there's no point at which you can say, have I have I finished, have I finished my learning? There's no such thing. But the how can I say, like, the occupational hazard of studying is that the more you learn, the more you know there is to learn, which I wouldn't call a hazard. I think it's a benefit, but
Yeah, no, but it is something you don't necessarily expect when you get into it. But yeah, I love how you define that. Like professional meaning that like, again, it's not so much about making money off of it or like make it turn into a business. It's more about like you being like a member of that field, right? Like you know the jargon. You're like in that world. You can like you're familiar. You're like part of the conversation. You know, like the real conversation from the inside about that field. Like that's what being a professional means. And
I would
um,
say, yeah. Oh, I mean, I think it's also about having a kind of identification as a Torah
mm,
person. We have
mm,
this for men who are yeshiva raised, right? So
mm,
when they're raised from the yeshiva, we call them bnei Torah,
mm,
right? They're bnei Torah, they're bnei yeshiva, bnei Torah, and we don't really have an equivalent term for women so much.
mm,
Like we would say in Israel, you say they're benos b'nai Yaakov, like they're in the Beis Yaakov world or whatever we'll call it, whatever the network is, but we don't really have the same idea of the significance, like the profound impact that living, absorbing Torah, learning it assiduously, and having it be the preoccupation of your life that underlies all your other preoccupations. I'm a mother, I'm a wife. I've had many other kinds of jobs. I work in the community, I deal with my students, I'm a supportive friend, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. Like, I have all of these different roles that I play, but the thing that underlies it is going to be my relationship with the Torah Kedusha. Like, and I want it to inform every part of my life. But if you don't study, it doesn't. It can't, because you need a lot of input to be able to have it inform every corner of your life. I mean, I think that as Jews, it's as Jewish women, we want it to inform every corner of our life, but our lives are quite complex. Women's lives have become quite complex. So, what does it mean to be a fully Torahized individual as a Jewish woman, without necessarily the life of the yeshiva or the daily daf yomi or whatever it is that is the maintenance, routine for men to be and to stay Torah infused individuals? I don't think we have so much a model of this for women. Exactly. Not yet.
yeah. And do you think we should?
Yeah, but I mean, not again, I don't think the model is the same necessarily. I
Mm,
think that we have options. The fact that I remember was Rebbetzin David said, she was the Menahelis of BJJ. So, and the daughter of Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Zichrono Livracha, and I remember hearing in her name that there's no Masorah when it comes to chinuch habanos. There's
mm,
no set tradition for the education of girls and women, which
right.
which I always find being I think it's very freeing,
Yeah.
because there's no Masorah. It means that, like the Rebbe said, like let's find out what people need. Let's find out what women want. Let's be guided by the ritzonos and the tzrachim, the desires and the actual needs, spiritual needs
Mm,
of women. It's very
mm,
interesting. We have a lot of flexibility. And it's a little bit like, not having an obligation to pray with a minyan. So what does
mm,
that mean? That means that if you want to dance around your living room while you daven, you get to do that. And I think sometimes the lack of structure around this, instead of it being something that leaves you in the dark, winds up leaving a lot of space to turn on the light. You have to figure out what it is that you need. We have a lot of flexibility.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I guess I feel like it's a little bit, it's a hard thing. This isn't the direction I plan to go, but I kind of, now that you mentioned that, I kind of want to go down there, which is like, I found actually before I had a family, before I had children, I really appreciated that flexibility. Like for sure with davening, where like I don't have to be part of a minion. I can kind of just like do my own thing at home and like go into my own space. And like I really appreciated that flexibility that we have. And then actually now that I have like a bunch of small children, I actually find that I kind of need that structure to kind of bring me back. Like it's harder for me to like recreate that environment for myself at home, and like I almost like crave being in a shul environment with that structure. And I think the same thing could be true with learning. That like on the one hand, there's a lot of like benefit to the flexibility, but it could also in a way make it more challenging, right? Because it's so open, because there's so much. It's like I can do this anytime, anywhere, in my own way. There's also that struggle of like, but how do we make that work? And I think, let's say with Torah, because there's less of that like defined framework for learning, and there is sort of this like more fluid kind of up to interpretation. Sometimes it ends up being that like it's harder to figure out exactly how to find your place in that, and sometimes I feel like we end up, I guess like the fallout of that sometimes is that like there's less like of this like sort of standard of like this is what learning should look like for women, and therefore like we kind of end up I don't know, selling ourselves short and not actually accomplishing what we could. So I don't know if you want to
I can
address
already
that.
hear in the background there that you and I have a common thread
Yeah.
between us. You're,
Yeah.
I mean, probably many, but one of them I can feel already. You, like me, I feel are very committed to having women return to learning from the actual sources instead of, you know, by way of this one, by way of that one, someone who's teaching,
Mm,
who's charismatic, but who is pulling from a
mm,
translation that was rendered by, I call this low fidelity Torah. And sometimes it's very effective. It can be really wonderful, and everything's got its place.
yeah.
But I'm a musician, and I believe in high
Mm,
fidelity. If you
mm,
want to have richness and we'll say a kind of why is it called high fidelity? Because it's faithful. Fidelity means faithfulness. It's faithful to the sources. So I am very, very committed to also in women's education that even the most casual sheer, I mean, even whatever it may be, it really, really, we do ourselves a disservice by being too far away from the holy letters on, black on white on the page. And I don't think that I think that there are ample women who have the skills and the knowledge to be able to share what the Torah has to give us. Sometimes it needs a little bit of work in the transmission. Sometimes the best learners are not the best sharers, and sometimes the best sharers are not the best learners. And somehow I hope that we're going to be able to find a harmony and create harmony so that there should be good learning and good sharing, quality learning and quality sharing, that they can come together. That's what I would like to always see more of.
yeah, definitely. And you think that helps with the kind of giving a structure, so that it's not, you're saying like, I guess like feeding that sort of, starting to sort of, address that issue of when it's so open, sometimes we end up kind of not doing any of it. So you're saying like when we kind of can go back
That's
to
more
the,
like a time. That's more like a time and structures issue. I
yeah,
drifted away because I brought up a different
yeah,
point, but to get back to
yeah,
what you had said. It's look, I had all these years, let's say about going to shul. I don't have little kids in the house anymore, but
yeah.
for years I did, Baruch Hashem. And and I think about all of those years of davening at home and stealing a tefillah here, stealing a tefillah there.
Mm,
And I'm just going to share a lesson from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He says, "Onus Rachmana Patre." The Talmud tells us, right? Onus Rachmana Patre. A person who has mitigating circumstances to prevent them from doing a mitzvah, patre. They're they're not held accountable for not having fulfilled that mitzvah. But he adds a caveat. He says that's only if the only thing that's preventing you is the onus, meaning you're pater, you're not obligated because you have it's situational, but you still have an obligation to have the desire to do the mitzvah. You can't just say that you how does he put it, that like okay, so I can't do it, so I set it aside. I find that in the life of women, it's like this arc, it's not the same steady beat, generally speaking, like the life of men. It's an arc of time, circumstances, obligations upon you. And the women who I think will say, like, when they don't have quite the same pressure on them, especially with small children. When they don't have that pressure, if they were able to keep stoking their desire to feed their spiritual lives by through tefillah, through learning, whatever it might be, even if they weren't able to accomplish it in exactly the way that they wanted, but stayed a priority for them. And the only reason why they didn't do what they wanted to do was because of the mitigating circumstances. Then when those circumstances are removed, presumably they will make time to do those things because they remained a priority. So like that stoking, to keep the fire burning. I'm a big believer in that. Like, okay, so let's say you can't get a full tefillah in, or you can't do more than a very short tefillah, or you can't do more than listen to a podcast, a shir, a little something here or there whenever it's, okay, fine. But who told you that you should let go of your ratzon? Don't let go of the desire, because the circumstances eventually change, for everybody. And you still want to be a person who's stoked to do the things that really give you vitality, that give you your highest. So I think that that's like an art for women, like how to keep that fire stoked. Don't feed it so much that it burns everything down. Don't stop feeding it so that it goes out completely, but just keep it burning.
I love that imagery. Yeah, and I think maybe just going back to the example you give of like being a professional, it's, like you said, it's like a self-definition, it's an identity. So like if you're a medical professional, like even okay, I'm not practicing right now, but like it's still my identity, and like I'll go back, I might go back into the field, and actually, have a job in that field at some later point, but like it's still part of who I am. And yeah, like keeping that desire alive. And I think in a way it's easier to not keep the desire alive. It's like if you can't feed it, it kind of feels like, okay, I'd rather just like pretend I don't care and just like move on and like
Oh, well, we always
worry about
like
the
to,
other stuff.
the stuff that's difficult, we're always happy to numb out about it. I mean, but
Right,
that's
exactly.
not, it's not advisable.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not advisable. So, I mean, it's to yearn for something. What's the power of yearning? Honestly, this is very feminine power to begin with. Like all of that yearning, all of that wanting. This is
Mm.
Isarusa de la Saka. This is essential. This is like quintessential feminine avoda of like the wanting of something, the continuing to stoke the fire of something, even if you can't fulfill it at this moment in time. It's very deep avoda.
Mm.
Yeah. Like I see, it's like the arc of, Yom Noraim in shul. Like who's in the shul? Yom Noraim, the whole tefillah. So you have like the girls,
Mm.
you've got those girls who are, you know, at that age of they're sort of, teens into pre-married, and then, for the first like year or something, they might still be in shul for the whole tefillah, and then they're going to be hopefully, right, in the best of circumstances, they're going to be swamped for however many years, and eventually they come back, and like I'm now at the other arc, like I'm at the other end of the arc of like I'm now the Baba who can sit in shul all day and like there's no reason where else would I be? That's exactly where I want to be. But now I have the perspective to see like who actually is in the shul for the whole tefillah, you know. And
Mm.
and what were my 30 years like, or whatever my 25 years like?
Mm.
Between that point and that point was just kept it stoked.
Wow. Yeah. Can you tell me some like what are some challenges you had with like developing in your own learning? And maybe like how you overcame those challenges.
Okay, so it's interesting. Because as I mentioned, I wasn't like a great success in my Limudei Kodesh when I was growing up. So when I finally decided that this was something that was a priority for me and I had to invest in it, I was really behind. I had also spent some time in public school. I wasn't exclusively in day school. So I really didn't have, by the time I had the desire, I didn't have the kalim. I didn't really have the tools. So, which was really humbling for me because I'm smart and I have got a great memory. Baruch Hashem, is like Hashem gave me gifts, and wow, how humbling was it that everything always came so easily to me. And when it came to Torah study, I had to really buckle down. I remember the first 3 months that I went to Cleveland. I learned in Cleveland for my teaching seminary. I spent 2 years there, and I was really out of my element. It was really quite a miracle that I got there. I really had a lot of desire to be in that particular place. So I fought very hard about getting there, but I was really behind. In terms of concepts, I was ahead of a lot of my contemporaries, but I was a little bit older than the rest of the girls, and they all were like the cream of the crop of Beis Yaakov. And I didn't have that kind of education at all. So I remember the first 3 months, I remember sitting over my Chumash homework and crying. It was like the first time ever I had tried to master something, and I just felt like I remember. There's a story in the Talmud about two Amoraim talking about Rav's name, his nickname. Rav's nickname was Abba. His name was Abba. They called him Rav as respect, and he had a nickname Abba Richter. Anyway, so he was tall. So the Abba Richter, like long Abba, big Abba. Isn't it funny to think of the Chachamim like in that way? But anyway, it's a very interesting Agadita about a statement that one of the Chachamim makes about a statement of Abba Richter. He said, "You call him Abba Richter. You have like the temerity to call him Abba Richter." I remember sitting with him in Keren B'Yavne. This is before he went down to Bavel. I remember sitting with him in Keren B'Yavne, where the Chachamim were arranged in rows that were ranked according to your wisdom and your knowledge. And I sat many rows. I forget. He says 11 rows. I don't remember. I said 11. I think it was 11 rows. I said 11 rows behind, and he and another chacham, they were speaking divrei Torah. It was like sparks were flying from one mouth to the other. I didn't understand a word that they were saying. So I remember when I came across this Agartha, I said, I may not understand that, but I understand that that's kind of how I feel. I'm sitting in a class, and these students, they were like top of their class all through their Beis Yaakov education. They can quote psukim and meforshim back and forth. They have it all on the tip of their fingers. And for me, I was so humbled and ashamed that I don't want to say ashamed in the negative way, but it was so humbling for me. The first 3 months, it's the only time in my life I ever thought that I would give up because an intellectual endeavor was too difficult for me. And I remember about 3 months in, I remember all of a sudden realizing, why am I not taking advantage of my Shemona Esrei enough every day? I'm not taking advantage of my Birchas Kriya Shema sufficiently every day. I am not really begging with tears like I'm crying now over this homework. I need to be begging in tears while I'm davening for Chochmah Bina V'das. I need to be davening for that V'sein B'libeinu Bina. Lavinu laskil, lishmor, lilmod lamed. I need to be crying like I'm frustrated right now with my homework. That's how I have to be davening. And then I had a breakthrough. I was my valedictorian for my class in the end. I did in my second year. I wound up doing stuff that I did my student teaching in high school, which I hadn't. I got a diploma for also teaching high school after graduating, which I hadn't done in many years from that school because they didn't trust the girls. Not that they didn't trust the girls. It was like they saw they were only really sending out immediately into elementary school, and eventually they'd work their way up. They really, I blossomed after that. But wow, was that hard? Was that hard? I was so behind.
Wow. It's like hard to imagine it now, considering where you are right now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I was really behind, and it was paradoxical because in terms of understanding things, my understanding and my, let's say, musagim or hashkafa or deeps, I had already been through Derech Hashem. I had been through a lot of Hasidus, Chabad Hasidus. I had learned a good amount, so conceptually I knew a lot more than my fellow students. But the like the bricks and mortar, no way. I was.
Wow. So tell us maybe a little bit about Shiviti now, like, or I don't know when that started, but tell us like what like inspired you to start that? What was like the gap you were trying to fill? Tell us what it is, what you do.
Okay, so Shiviti is a women's learning program. We have students from all over the world. We have classes in person. There's also classes online. And it's gone through a couple of evolutions since we started. Like, we started about 7 years ago. The initial program, pre-COVID, was to have a single year program, potentially with the option to extend to a second year, to provide for women who want to go into Jewish education or who are already in Jewish education to have a kind of supplementation in deep machshava, sources that they normally would not have seen, a whole approach to teaching about mitzvos, a lot of stuff, also Jewish history, a very intense course in Jewish history. I had created a curriculum of all the stuff that you're not learning someplace else. So I didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. Like, let's say, in terms of Chumash. So, yes, we learned Chumash, but we didn't do the usual way of teaching Chumash. I wanted to teach methodology, especially of learning Rashi. Proper methodology in learning Rashi is the basis of all. Once you have that down, you can learn anything, as the Mamloe says. And so we spent enormous amounts of time on really being developing deep understanding of straightforward pshat in Rashi. Now, of course, for Chabad Hasidim or Chabad Hasidus, this is not news, but for a lot of people, it is news how much energy you need to expend in order to get a proper, deep, clear, analytic approach to Rashi. So I spent a lot of time building that in students and other things. A whole course on something called Spirit of the Law. Spirit of the Law, I'm very invested in because it's a whole new way of approaching pnimiyus of mitzvos, the internality of mitzvos. So I would use from many different sources, from Derech Mitzvosecha, of the Tzemach Tzedek, obviously, Ben Ish Chai, Likutei Halachos of Reb Nosson, and deeper, the Shla Kadosh, a very wide variety of sources that are normally women don't have a single look at. They never look at those. So that's what I wanted to share with educators, meaning a much deeper enrichment. And I assumed that the other stuff they're just going to have either gotten it someplace else or get it someplace else. So it was a morning program. Then COVID hit. We switched immediately into community education because we wanted to serve the community. There were a lot of women who were isolated, scared, at loose ends, all through COVID. So that became the focus, community education. Now I am back to splitting time between community education, because I can't quite leave that, and instead of a big program for educators, pinpointed programming for educators and for women who are in service to the community in different capacities. So that's the focus now for Shiviti. It's split between community education and enrichment for Jewish women who are professionals in different fields.
So can you give some examples of those fields that women would be in, and like what are you offering them specifically to enlighten them in those fields?
So let's say so Shiviti partners with an organization called CORE. And CORE has a huge network, thousands of women who are parts of 13 different communities of practice who serve the Jewish community in lots of different ways, whether they're college teachers, they're doulas, they work in Chevra Kadisha, they are in school, they're teachers in schools, or they are in adult ed, or whatever it might be. So I do a lot of work with them through their communities of practice. I also lead their community practice of adult educators, which is a nice network of 300 plus women who are all in adult ed all over the world. So I'll give you an example. For the Chevra Kadisha, they have an association also, several hundred women all over the world. They asked me to provide a whole series of classes that would enrich their work doing taharos. So I created a whole course, and the truth is, every so often, even though we learned what I had to give them, and then they said we want more. Okay, so brought them more, but the sefer that we use as the basis of walking through all of the tefillos of the taharas, as well as the pnimiyus of the practice of tahara, and everything surrounding it, and other things relating to death and burial, is the sefer is Ma'avar Yabok. Now, Ma'avar Yabok is a Kabbalistic work that's several hundred years old, that has become, it's basically the foundational source that collected and put together and codified all of these practices that have become, that have been sort of more standardized now in Jewish communities all over the world. Ma'avar Yabok is a very difficult sefer to understand. You need a lot of background to be able to go in and make sense of it, and then to take and extract usable material from it so that women, even if they're not that educated, can have it transform their practice of tahara, that's a whole other kind of work. So that's what I did for them. Now, for those women who were in those classes, I can't speak for everybody, but the overall response has been that it's been transformative, and that's the Torah's power. It is the Torah's power, deep Torah, especially pnimiyus haTorah, to transform the action down in the world of the physical material. The more material the work you have to do, the higher the Torah you need to be able to enliven it and fill it with an awareness of God. So so that's one example. Now, Chevra Kadisha, I've done similar stuff for a different organization. That's not the Community of Practice. NASC is the National Association for Chevra Kadisha. So they also came and had a partnership program for their network of women who work in Chevra Kadisha to appreciate more of the pnimiyus of the avot of the psukim, of the tefillas.
Wow, that's fascinating. What do you feel? Maybe, you mentioned that like you were trying to give them access to this sefer, this very esoteric sefer, Mavar Yabok. And I guess the question is like, what do you see as the benefit of women actually being able to like see it in the words of that sefer? Because you clearly are an extremely knowledgeable woman. You can give it over to them. You can give them a lecture and tell them, all the ideas they need to know. We clearly have a similar approach with this, but I'm curious if you can like kind of share the benefit that you've seen of women actually like sort of seeing excerpts of the sefer in the original.
Okay. So there's a few different parts to it. So I'm not under the impression that most women are going to become scholars. Most women are not driven to become scholars, at least not Torah scholars. That's not the thing that drives them. But for the women who do feel such a drive and who do feel that that's their calling, so the way of bringing, how can I put it? You have, we say, "Ein lakadosh baruch hu ba'olamo ela dalet amos shel halacha." HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the only space he has in his world is within the four amos of halacha. Now that's very interesting. We say malok l'artz kvodo, shamayim ushmei shamayim lo yichalkelucha. Like, what? That's the place that Hashem has down here in this world within the four amos of halacha. Every single nanometer of the universe is filled with his presence. Leisaso panamine. It's not a single space that's devoid of his presence. What does it mean that's the space he has? So the way I understand it is like, the letters, the aleph base, 22 letters, black and white, with whatever they're 5 kfulos, but okay. But we'll say we have 22 basic letters and 5 kfulos, and they are like, they are for me the dalet amos shel halacha. They are the tzimtzum. They are the means through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracts and constricts and brings down his infinite will into the expression that human beings can appreciate down here in this world. The letters, the holy letters, the words they form, and the ideas that are conveyed through them, and the infinite nature of the ideas that can be conveyed through them. This is something that's such a mystery. How can the infinite, think about the Torah, the entirety of all of our literature. How big was the Frierdiker Rebbe's library? You tell me. How many volumes?
I don't know. I'm supposed to know, right?
Listen, we're talking, and how many volumes have been lost over the years? You understand
Yeah.
through our long exile. So you think the entirety of all of Jewish literature and thought, everything that we have of Yiddishkeit, really, what does it come down to? The letters of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, from the Beis of Bereshis until the Lamed of Leinei Kol Yisrael. That from the first Beis of the beginning of the Torah to the last Lamed of the end of the Torah, everything but everything is only extrapolations from those essential words. How can those essential letters that are between the Beis and the Lamed, right, between Bereshis and Leinei Kol Yisrael, how on earth can that yield hundreds and hundreds of thousands of volumes? How? Only because it's the mind and the will of the Infinite One that's mitztamtzem to down to the black square letters, black and white, into the page, and it can contain endless, because the mind and the will of the Infinite One is infinite, right? So when you introduce the holy page, the holy Torah, to a woman, even if she hasn't got the kelim, to be able to learn those words, but it connects her to something. When they raise the Torah in shul, right? They raise the Sefer Torah for Hagba and Shul. They pick it up, and everybody says, "Zos haTorah shasam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael mipi Hashem biyad Moshe." So, and the women up in the women's section, they reach out a pinky, they kiss it, they put out their fingers, they kiss it, they want to see the letters. The idea of bringing raising the Sefer Torah up to the place where the women in the women's section can see it is brought down in halacha. Why? Because we understand osios machkimos. The letters, seeing the letters themselves, they have a positive effect on your holy consciousness. So, of course, why for women should be any different? Adrabah, just like she should see the letters in shul, she should see the letters on the page. She should never have a suspicion, and this is, I think, where, in our world now, contemporarily, it's confusing for a lot of women because they are detached from the source. They're not seeing the sefer inside. They don't actually know what it says. They don't know what the person who's teaching has drawn from here or from there. Maybe it's their own interpretation. Do they really know that it's something that they can rely upon and depend upon? If it came from a sefer that's a sefer that's mekubal beinei kol Yisrael, it's a sefer, it's a text that is accepted and beloved and treasured by the Jewish people, then this is an authentic Torah tradition that you can plant your flag there. You can say, this I can rely upon. There's a lot of stuff that people say that doesn't necessarily have much root in Torah. How are you to know what it is and what it isn't? Only if you're seeing inside a text. We are a textual people. That's what we are. Once upon a time, we were oral tradition people. And then we went out into the world of exile. And in the world of exile, the Chachamim knew that without becoming a more text-based people, we were not going to be able to manage throughout our long exile. So we are very, very glued to the text. Of course, you can talk about it, discuss it, you can come up with new ideas, you can be mechadish chidushim, obviously. But I've met too many women who had good educations, who don't really know what it says and what it doesn't say. That shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be that way. I'd like to change that if I can.
Yeah, I feel like you expressed that really well. Yeah. Maybe we could talk a little bit about Hasidus in particular. I know you're very passionate about pnimiyus haTorah, and like you started off at the very beginning saying that you felt that was like what was missing in your day school education was like the spiritual element of Yiddishkeit, and I feel like I've heard that from other people also, sort of feeling like, there's one woman I spoke to, and she was like, I don't want to learn any more halacha. I learned so much halacha, and like all the depth and all of it. Like, just teach me something. Like, teach me the meaning behind it. And yeah, maybe if you could share a little bit about what you think is so valuable that Chassidus can offer that other areas of Torah can't. What do you see it doing for women in their lives? And maybe if there's like any misconceptions people might have about Chassidus that you think you would want to enlighten them about.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't categorize all spirituality available in the tradition and put it only in the box of Hasidus. That's the one thing I want to clarify. We have a very rich misnagdic tradition that's very deeply spiritual and very Kabbalistic, comes, rooted in the teachings of the Vilna Gaon, also from the Ramchal, etc., of the Italian Kabbalist tradition. We have the Sephardic, we have the whole world of the Sephardic tradition in all of its many different dimensions. So, we have a very, very broad spectrum of pnimiyus haTorah available to us. Hasidus is, I think, has, let's put it like this. You see, there are certain things I can say. As a Hasidus, I could say certain things, but you always have to be careful, because you're not interested in alienating anybody. So sometimes the best bad luck, I don't agree with them absolutely, but they have a kind of a witz, they have like a kind of a sharpness to them. But let's just say, let's put it like this. It's not me. There was a great Hasidic master of the previous generation. His name was the Rav Kolonis Kalman Shapiro. He was the Piasetzner Rebbe, and he was the Rebbe of Warsaw Ghetto, and he had a Beis Chinuch prior to the war years. He was a master doctor of the soul, incredible thinker, and I love to learn his works, and I love to teach them. So he has, in a very small kuntris, which I think is very important. Actually, I'm a very big advocate that women should assemble themselves around the principles that he outlines in this book. There's a book called B'nai Machshava Tova, which is a guideline for creating groups of conscious community for spiritual development. And he gives very, very great guidelines for developing such groups, and they're very highly collaborative. They're very highly, they are, what's the word? They have great equity to them, meaning they're not hierarchical. They're a very wondrous, little kuntris. It's not a big book. It's kind of a booklet. So in there, he has he has a teaching that I think it kind of makes it clear about Hasidus. He says that this is like, things that people who know. So he says that the lechem. Okay, the word for bread is lechem in Hebrew. Lechem is 3 havayos. Its gematria is three times the Shem Havaya, 26. And so he says a makubal, a Kabbalist knows that lechem is 3 havayos, meaning it's something that exists for him in the realm of knowledge. He also understands, like, when you eat a piece of bread, when you're making hamotzi and you're going to eat a piece of bread, the kinds of shemos and the forms of divine names that are appropriate to this action of eating. And in a certain way, it exists as a meditative exercise that's in the mind. And he says the difference between a makubal and a chassid is that when a chassid eats his 3 havayos lechem, he feels that he is getting life force from the Borei Olam, that he feels that he's getting his vitality directly from God through the eating of this bread. And in the world of, human existence, right here down here with 2 feet on the ground. So Hasidus is basically a means for the pnimiyus haTorah to be brought to the place where people live, where people are existing. That's why there's such variety in the world of Hasidus, because there's Polish Hasidus and there's Chabad Hasidus and there's Breslov Hasidus. There's all of the Hasiduyos that branched off from different Talmidim of the Maggid, and all of the different ways in which they were so different from one another. We lost so much during the Holocaust, but we still have quite a variety of the Hungarian Hasidus and all of its beauty, which is different from this, which is different from that. Very often the realm of real Hasidic work and avoda and teaching, women don't really learn much. I'm not talking in the realm of Chabad. Chabad Hasidus is an outlier, as well as Breslov, in having from its outset been focused on the women. Rabbi Nachman said to his students, go home and make your wives into Hasidos. For the last 200 years, there's been discussion in the world of Breslov. Did that mean get them on board sufficiently so that they'll let you go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah? Or actually share the light of this Hasidus, like go home and get your wives to be living those. You gotta transmit these ideas to them in the way that's going to work for them. For the most part, among Breslov Hasidim, this is something that's understood. Women have real spiritual lives. They need to have very deep Torah to be able to sustain those lives. And so therefore there's a lot going on in women's learning in Breslov Hasidus in all of its various stripes. And if there's not, the learning is not there, at least the appreciation is there. But, and of course, in the realm of Chabad, so Chabad as well had this also, if not directly at its outset, then soon enough afterwards in the history of Chabad. We have enough examples in Chabad Hasidus of learned women who are leaders, women who are Torah guides, and the emphasis, of course, at the Rebbe place, but even before then. So we have, so that's not in question. In the realm of Hasidus as a whole, there's a big difference between the world of Hasidus and the teachings of Hasidus. Like the Hasidic world as it is, and the Hasidic teachings. So you can have, like here in Israel, there's a huge world of people who are they would consider themselves in the Dati Leumi world. They're in the national religious world, and they're very, very into Hasidus, very, of all different kinds. So I think that the people who decide, whether they were raised with it or it comes through some exposure, the people who decide that they want to be eating their bread with awareness of Hashem, they're going to wind up somehow or other finding their way to Hasidus. If you want to be able to, um, you know, I don't know, be feeding your babala and be thinking about the Ribbon Shalom and really keep Hashem in mind, to not forget him. So I think most people are somehow or other making use of tools of Hasidus. That's my feeling.
Nice. Never heard that story of the PSS and Rebbe. That was really nice. So I guess maybe like the question people might have, like maybe just to push back on that a little bit, is that like when you're actually learning Hasidus, for sure Chabad Hasidus, then like a lot of it isn't so like practically, or doesn't feel so like practically applicable. There's a lot of stuff that are very esoteric and very, very Kabbalistic, and it doesn't feel so much like it's in our world. So I guess the question is like, is there a way that we need to learn Chassidus in order to bring that into our world and make it applicable? Is there also a value to learning the more theoretical, esoteric parts of Chassidus as well? Yeah, how would you address that?
Okay, well, I think that it's antithetical to the nature of Hasidus and its purpose for it to remain in the theoretical. However, it's a particularity of Chabad Hasidus, the idea of Moach Shalat Alev, that you have like the assumption, which it is also in many places in Musar. You understand that Chabad Hasidus is the most Litvish of all Hasidios, even though Chabad, you know what I mean. Like in terms of its intellectual development and its focus on the ways in which changing your mind changes you, that's much more consistent with a lot of different schools of Musar. That it's a lot more similar in some ways. The idea being that you're purifying the mind and changing yourself from the highest place, so you're going to be able, it's going to have a trickle down, like as it says in the Zohar Kadosh, like it says in Shir Hashirim, that there's a kind of trickle down effect from Libuna de Mocha, from the mind down into the place of the behavior and the heart. However, that being said, the rule is that lo midrash eker el hamasa, that learning is never the purpose. It's always about what's going down 2 feet on the ground. And it doesn't only have to do with theoretical learning as opposed to learning halacha. It has to do with how you're living down here in this world. So it's not only an issue of chasidus, right? To stay away from being focused on merely the intellectual grasp of something. I mean, here we are talking, I'm talking to Chabad Hasidus, so I can talk the language of Chabad. Now, you understand that the idea that when you're learning Torah that you spend so and so much time in intellectual processing of the idea, and then you have to spend a certain amount of time in a state of hisbonenus and being karev to the Baal Imra, right? Like that you have to be close to the one who said that word. We're not talking about the Chacham, the Chacham in the Talmud who said this particular Dvar Torah, but rather the Baal Imra in the greater sense is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. There's no such thing as sitting and learning. It's not called learning if you haven't done the work of Vashivos Elevavecha. It's not, you understand it. That's true for everybody. It's not about Hasidus or theoretical Kabbalah or anything. We all having to do the work all the time, that everything that we learn, right, is penetrating and getting to the place of our heart and affecting us. Now, some people learn a kind of, let's say, the theoretical constructs or the mystical constructs that are to be found in Chabad Hasidus. And because the Baal HaTanya was such a master at putting everything in order, right? Even non-Chabad Hasidim love to learn Tanya because it makes everything nice and clear. There's a lot of stuff that's not so clear. He really brings it to a place of great clarity. So it's invaluable. At the same time, how do you feel? Do you feel curved to the Bore? Are you feeling the light of the tzaddik, of the Baal HaTanya also, as you're learning his words? These are deeply spiritual experiences. They change the way that you live your life the rest of the day. Even if you're spending half an hour and you're learning Hasidus in the morning. The idea being that it's like you're going and toiveling in the mikveh of Emunah. You're going to toivel for half an hour in the mikveh of Kedusha and Tahara, right? Of the words of the Torah. And even the highest, most abstract idea, it's never to be learned. There's no such thing as learning it in only a purely theoretical way. Chalila, right? So then the question is like, how far do you take it down? Are you the kind of person who, having, I don't know, had a good davening in the morning, or having learned a little Hasidus in the morning, are you the kind of person who that's going to sustain through the rest of the day, or at least until Mincha, going to sustain the rest of the day, so that you have Hashem in mind, right? The periodic learning, or the periodic tefillah, is meant to put us always back and reinfuse our awareness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So that's why we do it 3 times a day, right? What does the Medrash say? We left Mitzrayim, Moshe Rabbeinu taught us he got us back on track of praying 3 times a day, just like you have to eat 3 times a day. It's like, it's Mezona Denishmasa. This is the food of the soul. So learning something without being connected with it, and then taking it home in some way, isn't sustainable. I don't think that sustains people. That's not the thing that people need. But some people can learn, I don't know, they could learn Spheros and Olamos, and it so inspires them, it makes them feel so connected to something so high and holy, even if they don't understand it that well. It doesn't have to be practical. It uplifts them to a place of seeing things in a different way. Then it's very valuable. And if it remains only like some kind of mental gymnastics, then they should probably learn something else. Depends on the person.
Right. Yeah, I feel like a lot of it depends on the person and what your inclination is. I feel like some people need to be pushing themselves to make this more applicable, make it more relevant, actually bring it into their heart. And for some people, it's they need to push themselves to really expand their mind. Yeah.
In the end, it all has to be brought down to the ground. That's for sure.
Yeah.
In the end, it has to transform the way we act, the way we behave with other people, the way we are, what we do, the choices that we make, right? In the end, that's what it's all about. There's lots of different ways of getting there.
Nice. So do you think, maybe just going back to the discussion we had earlier at the beginning about, being a professional of Torah versus an
interested layperson?
Interested layperson, yeah. So I guess the next thing I would ask you is does everyone need to be a professional of Torah? Is there a place for someone to just be an interested layperson? Is it enough just to be getting your Torah through podcasts or, little tidbits here and there? Is that something that's for everyone, or not necessarily?
I think that the abundance of channels and means through which Torah can reach people is min hashamayim, it's hashgacha pratis, in order to enable everybody, whoever they are, with whatever their particular needs are, that they now have access to Torah in whatever way it needs to get to them. They could watch animated films. They could listen to podcasts. They could open Sefaria. They could join an online chabura. They could go to a shir. They could open a sefer themselves. It doesn't matter. We'll take it however we can get it, let people just learn, obviously. This is the biggest goal. People should just find whatever channel works for them, whatever inspires them, and go there. Not everybody is drawn to delve deeply into the sources inside, but I do feel that it is very important for Jews to be engaged with Torah on a regular basis. Meaning, it's not just about your kids doing well in their Jewish schools, and your men in your lives, that they have their daf yomi shir, whatever it is, or perhaps they're learning much more than that, I don't know, or being able to say a dvar Torah at the table. I think that it's not that I think. This is a deep conviction for me, because it's not something I made up out of my head. It's just something that it's a Torah idea that resonates very deeply with me all the time. A melech, right, a king, every Jew has an obligation to participate in the writing of a Sefer Torah, correct? It's a question, all right, let's just say. So, that's an overall obligation. Only one person has an obligation to actually wear a Sefer Torah on them, similar to the way that they wear tefillin on them, and that's a king. A Jewish king has an obligation to wear a Sefer Torah on his arm in the opposite place of the tefillin, is to be with him all the time. Why? So, al pi Chasidus, in accordance with Chasidus, we say, because you have to draw what's called orach chaim lemalchus. Malchus requires length of days. What does that mean? Malchus, in the case of a king, right, a person, any person in a position of power, his ego can get in the way. He can start to feel so much himself. One of the benefits of the Sefer Torah is it keeps a king on mission. And he knows who's instructing, who is the king here really? What is he only supposed to be doing? Only reflecting Hashem's malchus, right? Now, for everybody in their own lives, everybody has a quality of malchus that they're king over. You're king over your own quality of malchus within yourself, right? You have meaning. And what is malchus in that context? It means all of the places where you have to carry stuff out into the realm of action. The world of action is associated with malchus. Everybody has their whole arena of their existence down here in the world of the material world where they have stuff that they need to do. Okay? And that's all in the realm of malchus. Malchus is the nitty-gritty. It's all the place down here in the world of action that's about what you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to have a family, you have to make money. All of these things are like the realm of everybody's malchus. And then you have other kinds of malchus. You have the ways in which different people are influential on other people, right? Like you have a podcast. Everybody that you reach is within the circle of your malchus. It doesn't mean you rule over them. It means, especially through the power of speech, you have influence over them. Whether they decide to accept your influence or not, you are still making use of the koach malchus. Now, the problem with malchus is that it has a lot of vulnerability. It is very easy to forget Hashem in the realm of malchus. You are shopping, you are working, you are going about your business, or you are doing your podcast. You have to make an effort to infuse your awareness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu while you do all this stuff down here in the material world. Because the material world takes up all of our senses, yeah? It totally, without any hint that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there. You want to see him there in that realm of malchus where you have to act, you must put him there. You must put awareness of him there. What is the best way to enliven malchus, which will otherwise collapse upon itself with all of its ego and materialism? What is the best way to fill it with awareness of Hashem? Through Torah itself. Orachaim lemalchus. The king needs it. Everybody needs it. You go to work, you are going to need some Torah that's going to make you a working person who is spiritualized and aware of Hashem. You are taking care of your children. You're going to need special Torah that's going to breathe the life of Torah and awareness of Hashem down into the place where you are crawling around picking up Legos. You are dealing. You have a family, and you're constantly communicating with people, and you're in relationships with other people. How are you going to make sure that that family relationship and all those relationships are not poisoned by ego and self-seeking? Only by breathing Torah into it and awareness of Hashem. So every sphere that we're in requires the Torah that sustains it so that it doesn't collapse upon itself. I don't know if I just said something that's like way too much for people to hear, but I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, you did. That was great.
Like, I don't know, if you're a painter, learn Torah that infuses that's going to give you God consciousness in your painting. If you like to ride a bike, so learn the kind of Torah that's, that's going to awaken your appreciation and your love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the action of you riding your bike. It doesn't matter. But there's enough Torah to go around.
Yeah.
Torah everywhere, that it's able to address every single corner of human existence.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you're doing with the Shiviti in a way. It's like taking areas of practice that women are already involved in and like just infusing meaning and just a deeper understanding and appreciation for what that is that they're doing. And yeah, I think like sort of taking the load off a little bit is like, we're not saying like everyone needs to be a professional and everything and like you have to be this expert Torah scholar. Obviously that's not for everyone. But like finding the areas of your life that you have like a real curiosity and like this is something that you're already invested in and like finding a way to bring Torah into that corner of your life.
It brings life to that area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to help train more educators to be able to do that.
Yeah. I feel like it also takes someone of your level of knowledge, and clearly you have such a the diversity within Torah that you are familiar with is really incredible. So I feel like you're someone who can really like find the areas of Torah that really address every individual space, which is not everyone can do.
Need to find more women who want to join the team.
Yeah. We're recruiting, guys. Yeah.
Of this kind of work. It's very important. It's very much needed. Like think about all those teachers in school. You have, how many classrooms are filled with teachers who, with all their good intentions, they really do need more Torah to infuse that which they're doing. They don't necessarily need more Torah that they're going to share with their students. They already have a curriculum. But what they might need and probably need is the Torah that enlivens them in the work that they do. That's a whole different kind of Torah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't only need to know what we need to teach. Like to be a real educator, it needs to be so much more.
Like I'm not sure. I think the material that's shared is far less important than the spiritual activation of the teacher through the Torah that activates them, that really wakes them up and fills them with Hashem. That's really what they're transmitting to their students more than they are the Homer. The Homer is like, and
Yeah.
because you can, who are the teachers who affected you the most?
Yeah.
Invariably, they're the ones who are the most activated by the Torah that fills them. But that's not necessarily the Torah that they're teaching.
Right. Yeah. Okay, one more question before we end off with our closing questions, which is if you could summarize, and I feel like you addressed this a little bit, but what's the change you want to see in our community for the way that women connect to Torah?
Well, I gave an example. Like I think we've already talking about it. I mentioned the small groups that the Piasetzner Rebbe gives guidelines on forming. We had groups like this. We call them Benos Machshava Tova, not Bnei Machshava Tova. Those Benos Machshava Tova groups. And there's no like hard and fast rules about what you do together. Like I don't know if you have a group of 10 women or 5 women or 4 women in your area who like to you can make time to get together. Let's say you don't have a teacher in your place who's going to be able to teach you the Torah that you want. Fine. Get a book, if it's in English, along like something good, something really good that you all have a deep interest in. And it's not about getting through it. It's about like actually connecting and having it activate you. So if you read a paragraph and then you spend 10 minutes, every person in that group, talking about how this affects them and what they're going to do to bring it into their lives, this is a very effective method of studying Torah as a group together for women, which also builds community in a beautiful way. So if you're in a place where you have a teacher who can come to really give you something that's a little bit more source oriented and can share that with you, and that's what the women want, great. And if you don't, there's so many resources available. Like, there's no substitute for being in a group of like-minded women who are spiritually activated and who want to learn. There's just no substitute for it. So I feel that this is something that women have to take it upon themselves to recognize, like this is something it would so much benefit them to organize.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. Well, I want to buy the safer now. Is it translated to English? I would love to like share it with more people.
But this is me having worked as a translator for so many years. I'm very cautious about translations because all translations are editorial choices.
Yeah.
So, Bnei Machshava Tova, you could, I mean, it's on Safari, it's online, whatever.
Oh wow.
And
Cool.
I
Amazing.
I know that there was a translation done, I think, by Aronson. So you can look and see. But I think it was Aronson, maybe somebody else. But the original is always the best.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I mean, and I think also part of what makes it so, like, what makes it so much more impactful, those like small chabura type groups, is that you're fully engaged. Like in a way, when you go to a shir and someone else is teaching, like you're a little bit more passive. There's not as much of like your a personal investment or commitment, and it's like in those like that smaller group setting where we're all equals and we're all just investing in this learning for ourselves. You really there's really that sense of like personal investment and involvement, and like I think it's really powerful. Yeah.
Well, I would say honestly that like learning is actually about processing, which is something that gets ignored because a lot of the time we're focused on the transmission of information, even if it's very holy information, and we ignore the fact that true learning only really happens through the process of through hisbonenus. So you have to really go through a contemplative process, a process of understanding one thing from another. What does this mean for me? How's this going to impact me? What is this saying to me? How do I feel about this? That's part of the process of hisbonenus within learning. And if you don't do that, it's not called learning. It's called hearing.
Yeah.
You heard a shir. You didn't learn the Torah. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a certain way, such groups where you have processing, like processing is part of the structure, in a certain way, there's a lot more learning that can go on there.
Okay, I want to end off with two questions. One is, can you share a Torah thought or idea that something that you can't unlearn, something that's just like changed the way you see yourself or the world?
There's so many. It's very hard to define. It's very
Yeah.
hard to pin it down.
What's like speaking to you right now? Most recent.
No, I'm learning all the time. It's not, I
Same.
can't, okay. I'll give you okay, let me think about something specific. We, something that when I first saw it, it wowed me. When I was a kid, we, we got our first sitter, the sitter Shiloh. That's the sitter that they gave us. And I remember seeing, there was a yud and a yud. For Hashem's name, it had a yud and a yud. And, and when I was only 5 years old in first grade, I remember raising my hand and I asked the teacher, who was a veteran teacher, why does it say Yud and Yud, but we say Hashem or we say Adni, but why is it written as Yud and Yud? So she said, out of respect for Hashem's name. So I thought that it didn't make much sense to me but I couldn't get another answer. So that was all I got. Because, I mean, you could write hey, like for Hashem, or you could write out Hashem, or you could write something else. Adni, why do you have to write Yud and Yud? What does Yud and Yud have to do with anything? So I remember going home and I asked my father, why is it written in the Siddur Yud and Yud when we either say Hashem, when we're being respectful, or we're saying Adni, but why is it Yud and Yud? It's not even Yud Ke Vav Ke, right? It's Yud and Yud, always written. So he said the same thing my teacher did. He said, my father, Allah Hashem, he said, it's out of respect for Hashem's name. And it still didn't make sense to me. And it took another 20 something years until I was learning a Sefer Hasidus and I discovered what it is. And when I remember it was like such a wondrous epiphany to have, because it was a question that I had from the time I was a child. What is going on with this Yud and Yud? And the way it works is like this. It's to get across to us the compression of the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke and the Shem Adni. So it's the first Yud of the Shem Havaya and it's the final Yud of the Shem Adni. For people who learn Hasidus and Kabbalah, so this is like basic, very, very basic. But I remember years ago, the first time I saw this in a Sefer, and I was like, so it's Poseach, okay. So it's like this, right? You have Yud Ke Vav Ke and Adni, and they interlace with each other, these two names. So we say, Poseach es yadecha umasbir lechol chai ratzon. Poseach es yudecha umasbir lechol chai ratzon. When you take those two yuds and you open them up, not Poseach es yadecha umasbir lechol chai ratzon, like it says in Ashrei, open your hands, right? You open your hands, Hashem, and you satisfy the needs of all creatures. You open your yuds from the compressed Yud of Yud Ke Vav Ke to the last Yud of Adni. You open them up, and now you have clearly opened Yud Ke Vav Ke and Adni, which means that you are experiencing a sense of the ultimate, ineffable one down here in the world of action, down here in the world of the material, in the place of Malchus, that's Adni, where you're actually in feeling and sensing that the Borei Olam is filling every mamali kol almin usoviv kol almin mamali kol almin. He is surrounding the worlds and filling the worlds, and you're actually feeling it. That's where the bracha comes from. Poseach es yadechu masbil chol charatzon. When people have awareness that there's enon milvado and there's nothing but Hashem, that's called the way that the Shefa comes down to fill all the worlds. So that's one.
Good choice. I like it. I'm actually just teaching my daughter how to read from a sitter right now, so I'm going to share this with her.
Yud and Yud.
And she also is, she's like, what is this? Why are we
What's the Yud and Yud?
What's the Yud and the Yud? Yeah. Okay, and final question is, can you share a learning suggestion, something that, women, sort of an underrated safer or source or text or something that women might not know about or might not think is for them, that you think could be really impactful?
Okay, so that is a good question. Well, I mean, suggesting a sefer really depends on the capacity of the person who's asking the question, right? Like what I would suggest to one person is totally different from what I would suggest to somebody else. So, one sefer, but it's not a sefer, it's a set of 8 svarim that completely changed my life is Likutei Halachos of Rebbe Nosson of Breslov. He goes from Shulchan Aruch, from the beginning of Shulchan Aruch from Or Chaim all the way to the end of Choshen Mishpat. He goes through the details of halacha al pi Chasidus and Kabbalah. Unbelievable chidushim. It's somewhat more approachable than the Derech Mitzvosecha, somewhat less Kabbalistic, and so therefore somewhat more approachable, but more expanded than, let's say, the drashos of the Ben Ish Chai. Very powerful. The first time I came across it was actually also changed my understanding of a lot having to do with feminism, actually. But I'm not going to go into this. The first piece of it that I ever learned, this was way before I married my husband and became connected to Breslov, was about having a very deep understanding of what are qualities associated with the feminine and what's going on with them during the exile and what happens in redemption. So that's Rosh Chodesh Hay. But Likutei Halachos is unbelievable. I've been teaching it for 30 years, and it's incredible. Here's a funny story. When I first started learning Likutei Halachos, I got married. I married a Breslov Chassid. Wasn't so familiar with this farm, so I started learning them. We got married, and I was expecting right away, Baruch Hashem, and then we had our first baby, and she was like one of those babies who nurses, every hour and a half for 45 minutes. So I had a lot of sit-down time. So I said a lot of Tillim, and I started learning Likutei Halachos because I knew I really wanted to learn it. And I sat and I plugged through it all while I was nursing, mainly. That whole first year, when she was, in her first year. And a woman came to me once who had been in the house, and she saw that I had this farm next to me, and she said, will you teach a class on the Likutei Halachos? And I said, I'm sorry, I really can't. I'm just learning it now for the first time. And I'm not really conversant with it. I don't really feel comfortable teaching it. I really feel like I have to get a better handle on it. So she said, but there's no women who are teaching this book, and we have a lot of women who want to learn it. And I said, but I just told you I can't really teach it. I'm still working my way through it. I'm getting the grasp of it. And she said, so could you do that while we just sit around you and listen while you do that? Meaning, can you just do whatever it is that you're doing and you're learning, and we'll just join you for the ride? And I asked my husband what he thought, and he said, as long as they understand that you're still working, you don't have a definitive idea about it, you're still working on it. And it's new to you. So that's how I started teaching Chassidus. I was teaching other things before. I was teaching
Wow.
Mishnah.
Amazing. Wow, that's a good suggestion. Wow, I feel like I have so much more that we could talk about, and so much more we can explore with all these conversations. I really appreciate it. Thank you for making the time.
Simcha Rabba.